So you've seen Flesh and Blood about, but you've got questions. Well, this is the video for you. Hi and welcome to Tabletop Gaming. My name is Charlie and we are the publishers of a monthly magazine on all cool things tabletop, whether that's board games, RPGs or trading card games. And as you may see behind me, we're no strangers to Flesh and Blood in our issues. Now, we're going to talk today about why it is that you should care about Flesh and Blood. So all the questions that you've wanted answered before. So what is it? Why is it different? Where has it come from? What's the big deal about it? We have those answers for you, with also a little help from their new product, which is the First Strike decks, which are designed to get you playing quickly if you've never played before. Perfect! But without further ado, let's delve right into the questions. Let's do the biggest of all questions, which is, what is it? What is Flesh and Blood? Well, Flesh and Blood is a trading card game. It started in 2019 and it was designed by a Magic the Gathering champion. Now, that's quite important because although the game isn't Magic the Gathering, it's not a reskinned version, it is an entirely separate entity. It's very clever of someone that knows that game inside out and knows the little niggles or things that they think they could do differently to then innovate a brand new game from, right? So that experience makes them an expert in the field and perfectly positioned to create a game that people will love. Flesh and Blood. Now, interestingly, Flesh and Blood is all about playing in person. Play in Flesh and Blood, right? You need to be playing with other people, going to other spaces, heading to your local game store and getting involved. Which is why, fantastically, they've frequently offered things like starter sets in a way that are your Blitz decks, for example, or two-player sets where you have everything you need just to dive right in. That also goes to store level. They have a lot of information in stores, a lot of learn-to-play events or weekly nights that you can go to figure out how to play. So if you're not confident in learning yourself, and sometimes that can be tricky, make your way to your local store. They will almost certainly have something to help you and they can give you a little bit more info there too. Now, it's set in the fantasy land of Wrath and it comes with all of the fantasy tropes that we know and love. So it's a sort of medieval-esque era in terms of weaponry, but we have mythical creatures and magical skills and all those sorts of fun things that are typical of a fantasy trope, but they're typical because we want to see them. Now, within that, of course, there is lore, and with each set that gets released, there is new information about the lore, new explorations of that world and the characters within that world. But to actually just get started and playing, you just kind of need to understand that you're going to pit your hero against somebody else. Now, essentially what the game is trying to do is capture the vibe of a fight. It is heroes fighting heroes, you are playing as one, they are another, and instead of being sort of a team that we may see, you are that sole person. Your cards represent a person and their abilities and what they can do. Which means that unlike other games, you come to the fight the best health that you have. You start at the peak of your game with all of your stuff, everything available to you, and then you'll start to lose stuff as it gets used, as it gets damaged, as you take damage. And your fight that's actually happening is a lot more, I'll do this, then you do this, then I do this, which feels a lot more, I'm going to attack, you're going to defend, and a lot more thematically it makes sense. Which is actually a vibe through this whole game. A lot of what is explained as to why stuff is happening, when you actually look at it as a concept as opposed to necessarily what we would expect from a trading card game, it makes more sense than we've come to expect. Now, importantly, there are tons of different ways to play this. A lot of them do follow a standard trading card format in the sense that you can draft together. You can play a competition with drafting your own deck, you can complete your own deck and bring those along to events, and that is another set. Or you have things like Blitz decks or First Strike decks, which are pick up and play. You're pre-constructed, they're ready to go, ready to loose you into the wild so that you can get playing, and those are what we recommend for starting with. The main difference there is that there are less cards and they are all balanced, so you can literally just pull it out of the pack and get playing. They also take less time to play, so sometimes that can be better when you're learning to try and get an idea of what's going on and then move into the other. You may even love this format so much you build your own decks around this format. The world is your oyster. Now, I won't go into great detail about how it plays, but I do think it helps to give you an overview and an understanding of what it's actually doing. Because trading card games can feel intimidating, and there's no reason for that to be the case within this one. So let's have a look. So I'm going to start by showing you cards from Terra, which is the ready-to-play deck that is a First Strike deck. You can pick these up relatively inexpensively from your local game store, but just to give you an idea of what these cards are and what they're doing, we have Terra. This is our Elemental Guardian. Now, this is our hero, so we're going to play basically as as terror. Now, as a guy that's going to be fighting other guys, we're probably going to need some weapons. So actually, let's make sure we've got one of those in hand. So here is our redwood hammer. Now, it's worth noting that they have this little 1H, that's one-handed. You have two hands, so you can have two one-handed weapons, or you can have one two-handed weapon. There's also options for things like your helmet, which we will pop into our area, because look, we're going, well, how's our head going to be protected? With an iron rot helm. How is our chest going to be protected? Well, with equipment that covers our chest. You see how this works. We're building an armour so that when we fight, we have something to use. Once that gets destroyed, though, we're in a little bit of trouble, but we'll see how this goes. Now, whilst I'm not going to show you a full setup, I just want to give you an idea of what's happening within the cards. So essentially, you're going to be fighting each other, and in that fight, you're hoping to reduce the other character's health down to 0. So in this case, we have 20, and ultimately, we'd like to keep it that way. Of course, it's not so simple. But what we're going to do is be attacking and defending in the hope that we beat them before they beat us. Now, you have a number of cards to use each turn, and that's dictated by this number here. So in this case, I will only have 4. So just to give you an idea of mechanics, what we're going to have is resources. So you pitch certain things down in order to pay for later cards. So if I'm going to pick one, then perhaps I get rid of burgeoning, because it's going to give me 3 in order to play future cards. So I'll play that down. That means that I can play up to 3. Now, all of my cards right here are worth 3, and that's probably because Terror is quite brutish. He is strong. He's going to get big hits in, and you want to try and avoid that if you're on the other side. So maybe I'm just simply going to play Concuss, because that is my attack. If I pop that down, that would then go to the other side. We'd see what damage we do, whether they choose to defend against that or not, and whether we want to react against that too. And what that does is that creates a combat chain. It starts things happening, it starts more hits and coming backwards and forwards, and equally there are certain concepts that come up quite frequently. Namely, in First Strike, we have elemental options. Now, these sometimes give you extra bonuses that let you do stuff. So, for example, Terror's bonus is at the beginning of each end phase. If there is an earth card in your pitch zone, you may pay 1. If you do, create a might token. So by playing this, I get extra bonuses here, and that can totally be worth it. And I need to start thinking about what they may need to do, what they may have in their hand, what I may be able to draw out of my deck later along the way, and have this push backwards and forwards between the combat chain and between what I'm thinking and planning. But if you want to know in full how to play, there are separate videos for that, including one of our own, but you can see just an idea. Here is your hero, the weapons they may have, what you're going to be doing, and also what you get from what you're setting up. What's the point? Well, it's to try and win. We'll just do a very quick anatomy of a card just to give you an idea. So this is how much resource you can pitch your cards for. You'll notice the different colours and also the little blips. They show you how much you get back from doing that. The cost of playing them themselves is in the corner, and their attack and defence abilities are on the bottom. There are things you can do to increase these. Some cards will do it naturally, others you'll be able to stack up certain play orders in order to do so. There's a lot of tactic and a lot of knowing your deck that goes into it after you've got used to it. You can just sort of start to play blindly and figure it out as you go along, because after all, that's what most of us do. Now, something I mentioned earlier is that this was built by a Magic the Gathering champion, and the reason I love that is I said that they were able to use their knowledge on things that they loved and didn't love about the wider TCG in something that goes forward, something that takes another step. So this combat chain, for example, stops 2 things. It stops long chains where you're not doing anything because the other player is just playing loads of cards and it's all getting very, you're watching what's happening and you're sort of tuning out because they're taking ages to build what they're building and execute what they're doing. When a card is played to attack, you defend, and the very good tete-a-tete means that you're not out of the running. Also, because those resources that you're pitching are cleared at the end, you're never overpowering. So there's not someone that's going to have managed to got a good run of cards out that means that they have more resources, that means they can play everything and steamroll it to the end. It keeps things not just much tighter, but also it makes a lot more sense thematically what's happening. Because as well as you're being worn down by health, as you're using more of your defences, you're starting to become weaker, but you're still in the game. You're not taken out of it just because somebody else has managed to land a couple of hits or get some good cards down. Now, one thing they've said that I love is that they prioritise the fact that you win by playing well, not by being lucky. So it doesn't matter really what you draw, you just need to know the best things to do with it. And that's why you have things like your arsenal, which lets you tuck away one card that you can pull out in later rounds, which is super useful. Plus with that, you're constantly having to adapt your strategy. Now the other thing I want to touch on in this overview is the organised play, and that is just simply a way of saying getting into your stores and starting to do competitions. Now I like this as a very tiered access. It makes sense, right? So you start going in and you're going to learn to play, you're going to play some sort of informal weekly events where you're still playing against other people, you're still trying things out and learning how to play, but without the massive pressure of it leading immediately into something else. Now as you go through those tiers, you start getting more serious. So tier 1 is a little bit more chilled out, you can play against each other in increasing seriousness, but if you just want to be able to go every week and play a couple of games with your friends or newfound friends or try out a new deck combination, you absolutely can. You can stick there and that is all you need. Otherwise you start going through a couple more options. So tier 2 is where you start attending, and wins get you qualifications for later competitions as well. So you start to see your XP built, which you can do across them, see your XP built to show how you are and what you do, and a top winning space that there gets you more. It's not until tier 3 we reach national championships, get invitation only based on how well you do in the previous tier, and then tier 4 is where we start hitting like world championships and proper pro tours, which is also where we start seeing the big prize money, because this has been really well invested in. So it's something that if you go and you do well in this, you could actually earn some serious money from doing so. And ultimately you also just get to go to a really cool event with really fun people, which is a win in itself. Now the last thing you're probably asking me is how you actually start, and the best ways are the ways I have mentioned a couple of times, which is picking up those pre-constructed decks and heading down to your local game store, or head down to your local game store and pick up those pre-constructed decks. First Strike is the newest iteration of this. You may have seen Blitz decks in the past and others of a similar ilk. They come in these small boxes, they are incredibly inexpensive given how much they are providing, and they mean that you can get started literally with this box. You open it up, you grab the cards you need, give it a good shuffle and get playing. Now in learning, best thing to do is to play with other people. However, if that's not available to you or your local isn't putting something on at the moment, I mean, tell them they should, but just in case they're not, you can always find information online. So YouTube is a fantastic resource. You can find loads of people playing and how they best play, but also the website itself, so the Flesh and Blood website, I'll pop a link in the description, has a really fantastic tutorial that allows to sort of drag and drop and show you how these work, and it does so with these decks, which means you get to actually understand what your deck is trying to do and where you're going to be putting cards in order to play properly. So there you have it, that's Flesh and Blood. A very fun, easy to get into a game that you won't regret picking up and putting on your shelf. Never mind the fact that I've not even talked about how beautiful the artwork is, how incredible the theming is of each set that feels really distinct from one another, and the fact that if you're a collector like I am, those cards look great. But with that, we will leave you to your playing. I would love to hear your questions in the comments. Anything you want to know, give us a shout and we'll see what we can find out for you. But I want to hear also about your stories. Have you started playing? Do you want to play? What can we do to help you? I want to know everything. But with that, I will say thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and see you soon.